Good morning. Thank you for joining me for another 5 good minutes with the Word. I'm Barry Bryson, and we're going to begin a new study today. We're in the New Testament. We're going to look at the book of Galatians. Galatians may, and I think is, the early may be, and I think is the earliest letter that Paul has written. First Thessalonians might be earlier, but I don't think so. I think that Galatians is likely the first thing he ever wrote. And one of the reasons I think that is because it's different from any of the other letters that he wrote. They all follow basically the same pattern, not this one. And we just know from the topic and from the subject matter and from the historical references that it is very, very early. Paul in Galatians is wound up. He is upset, and he lets them know that he's upset with them, and he doesn't even ease into it. I mean, he says hello, and usually after he says hello, I'm praying for you, and I love you, and I'm proud of you for this. But I've heard this or that, or I need to talk to you about the other. That's not what he does here. I mean, he says hello, and then he says, "What is the deal with you people? What is wrong with you?" And we chapter 1, verse 6, and that's where we are. So it's a different book from anything else he has written, and I think it's going to be I think it's a really fun study. The book of Galatians is. The issue is the influence of the Judaizers. And so I want to take this first session to talk about the Judaizers. We meet them multiple times in the New Testament. They are there all through the book of Acts. Wherever Paul goes on any of his missionary journeys, the Judaizers or the Jews are following him around, causing him problems. And so I thought we should take some time to talk about what they were. And there are still Judaizers around to this day. The Judaizers are Christians who are Jews who associate themselves with the feeling of these certain Jews that in order to be a Christian, one not only has to repent and be baptized and to follow the teachings of Jesus, but one has to continue to keep the Mosaic covenant. And so it was a few months, maybe longer than that, before Gentiles came into the Lord's church. The first Gentile convert we read about is Cornelius in Acts chapter 10. And Peter comes back from baptizing Cornelius, trying to defend himself in Acts chapter 11 to the brethren who are all worked up. Not that he baptized Cornelius, but that he sat down and ate a meal with Cornelius. And that table fellowship is a huge issue in the book of Galatians as well. So we have Christians who are not necessarily begrudging the Gentiles' entrance into the kingdom, but who think that some of them think that Jews should continue to keep the law and keep themselves aloof from Gentiles because of the law. And others are thinking a Gentile can't be a Christian at all unless they keep the law. And Paul is having to deal with them his whole career. He's going to give some of that history here in the book of Galatians. The titular head, whether fairly designated or not, of this group in the first century, of course they kind of end in the first century in terms of ancient Christianity, is James, the brother of Jesus. It is James, the brother of Jesus, who does not insist that Gentiles become Jews. We'll see that in Acts 15. We talk a little bit about that later on. But James, the brother of Jesus, who seems to be the most influential Christian in Jerusalem, he's certainly the best known. In Josephus, he's better known than Jesus. He just is, and his assassination by the Jews is recorded in some detail in Josephus. James is known as James the Just, one of the most meticulous, if not the best keeper of the law in all Jerusalem. This is the James who wrote the book of James in the New Testament. And this is the James who in Acts 21, when the Apostle Paul brought this enormous sum of money that had been collected around the empire to support the poor saints in Jerusalem, and handed over these funds that he had dutifully and zealously collected, had James say to him, okay, but here's the thing. People here, they don't trust you, Paul. They don't. So what I need you to do is we've got some Christian young men here who've made a Jewish vow at the temple. Take them to the temple and pay the money for their vow. And then everybody here will know you're kosher. And we can just move on. And Paul does it. And when Paul gets there, that's when Paul gets arrested. And everything falls into place for Paul to go to Rome and be beheaded because he did the thing that James asked him to do that was goofy, that he did not need to do. But he did it. That's who these Judaizers are. And Paul is having to deal with them over and over again. When he's in Jerusalem, he tries to accommodate the Jerusalem brethren, but he gives no quarter to Judaizers in the Gentile world. And we'll see that described in great detail in the book of Galatians. And we'll see Paul speak in his most animated language. Paul, he wasn't just a firebrand against Judaism. We know what an advocate for law keeping he was. He was a persecutor of Christians. And we know from Romans that he said, if I could go to hell and the Jews be saved, I'd do it because I love my people. And we see him use the law properly, or the Old Testament, I should say, properly over and over again. But grace versus law, I mean, that's a theme in every one of his letters. And he circumcised Timothy, Acts 16:3, because Timothy was a Jew and had not yet been circumcised because his father was Greek. But he refused to circumcise Titus because Titus was not a Jew. He's continuing to deal, and you know that it's the worst possible irritant in his mission work, because before he was a Christian, he was so much worse. And now he is a Christian, he knows what it means to turn your back on the requirements of the law and to embrace grace. And to see Christians go back and try to re-embrace and reinforce the very thing he had to turn his back on to become a Christian. I think we understand here in the early years of his mission work, when he is a younger man, I think we understand the stridency of his tone, because he's upset, and he's upset for a reason. Okay, we're going to introduce the book as a book next time. Thank you so much for joining me for another 5 good minutes with the Word.